I'm honored to moderate this panel, which has been on my mind for quite a long time. But as Sabine just said, maybe it comes timely now when the devastating realities is putting the lives of all people in the region at stake for the sake of some trying to remain in power. When we planned for this panel on religion and ethics in times of war, I was very much triggered as a scholar of religious studies and an evangelical theologian that we are giving too much room to the voices within religions, be it Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, or other religions, who are proclaiming to speak in the name of God or of the divine when calling for the killing and the dehumanization of the other, quoting sacred text as the pretext for killing whoever is believed to be other or whoever is believed to be not on track in the same ideology that they are propagating. And if you open our newspapers or listen to the news, this is the mantra that we're always hearing. And I wanted to bring voices from all three religions who have been preaching, working, and living another path, not because they are secular, because these voices we do hear, but out of the religious identity, believing that the ethical foundation on every human being created in the image of the divine is that should be our guiding principle in dealing with whoever other is out there. And so it's really my pleasure to have been able to win Rabbi Brant Rosen from the US. Rabbi Brant Rosen is a constructionist rabbi, writer, and activist based in the United States. He is the founder and rabbi of Tzedek Chicago, a congregation grounded in social justice and anti-Zionist principles. He's co-founder of the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council and the author of The Wrestling in the Daylight, A Rabbi's Path to Palestinian Solidarity. Rabbi Brant, it's really an honor and a pleasure to welcome you in Vienna. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Viola, and thank you to the Bruno Kreisky Center and to all of you for coming out tonight for this conversation. I'm very, very honored to be sharing it with this remarkable group of people, and I've been looking forward to this for some time. As has been said, we are in a moment where the topic of this evening's conversation just feels so terrifyingly relevant, although perhaps it always was. But we are certainly in a moment, and a moment that has yet to play out. But I think we are definitely in a moment that we are seeing the unraveling of so many previously held assumptions about the world we live in. And here I want to start with the issue of narrative. We heard a little bit about the importance of narrative, both religious and just the various narratives that we hold sacred, whether we consider ourselves religious or not. And following World War II, there was one narrative, which was that after the cataclysm that gripped the world, and Europe in particular, that we were entering this new phase, a phase that cherished human rights, that started institutions and passed declarations and laws that would govern human rights for all individuals going forward, and that out of the the ashes of what had come before, that so the narrative would hold. We were entering a new and more hopeful time for all humanity. At the same time, almost identically at the same time, parallel to this, was another narrative that was unfolding. The birth of the State of Israel occurred during the same year, 1948, that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed. And this was a different kind of narrative, a narrative in which a settler colonial state was founded and seen as also a response to what occurred in Europe during World War II, as a kind of redemptive moment that the Jewish people who had been targeted for extermination now had a state of their own that could ensure their safety and security. And this was a narrative, certainly, that's at the heart of the Jewish community, of which I'm a part, but it was also one that was facilitated by the world, by the international community. And it was a narrative that was given religious significance as well. In the Jewish community, there are so-called post-Holocaust theologians, people like Rabbi Irving Greenberg and Emil Fackenheim, and to a certain extent, Elie Wiesel, who looked to the birth of the State of Israel as this kind of redemptive, positive, hopeful sign for the Jewish people and for the world. And I would claim, I would hold that there was the first narrative that I mentioned was one that was worth celebrating, but that there was a deep injustice embedded in that second narrative. And that is that this state that was founded, the State of Israel, was founded on the backs of another people, creating an injustice for them, what the Palestinian people refer to as the Nakba, driving them from their homes, ethnic cleansing them from their homes, and refusing to allow them to return, which created what is today the largest refugee population in the world. This was that redemptive moment, a moment of deep tragedy that continues to this day. The Nakba, as I think any Palestinian will likely tell you, was not over in 1948 and 49. And in fact, what we're seeing today, the genocide in Gaza, is in many ways the logical conclusion of this narrative. So I want to begin by saying that in some ways, while we are mourning the breakup of the human rights, the concept of human rights, as Viola and others have been saying, that there are nations that feel like they do not have to be held back by these notions and these laws and these conventions. They can do whatever they want. Also, we are seeing coming home to roost the idea that you can create a nation state, a colonial nation state, in a time that decolonization that was sweeping the world, except for this one place, that you can create a nation state predicated on the identity of one group of people, an ethno-state, that is predicated on maintaining a demographic majority of that people, because that's what Zionism holds. Zionism is an ideology and a movement that seeks to create a Jewish majority nation state in historic Palestine, that cannot happen without viewing people who are not Jewish, ergo Palestinians, as somehow a problem or an obstacle to be dealt with. And now we are seeing in terrifying ways that coming home to roost. But I want to say, and I know we're asked to speak only for a few minutes to begin, at the same time, from my point of view in the Jewish community, that I see things breaking apart, the old narrative breaking apart in ways that I think are unprecedented, particularly since October 7th. We are seeing in the United States, where I call home, a significant quarter of the Jewish community is rising up to stand in solidarity with Palestinians, not simply out of human conscience, but out of deeply held Jewish values. As Viola mentioned, I'm the co-founder of the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council. The Jewish Voice for Peace is a large and significant Jewish organization that is growing by leaps and bounds, intergenerational, but particularly young people who are growing up in a world that they don't buy the old narrative. They don't see it. They don't see it in the world. And as I hope you have seen here in Europe, after October 7th, there has been a huge participation of Jews in the Palestine popular movement. And I've personally participated in many. Shortly after October 7th, at the end of October, there were hundreds of us who sat down in the halls of Congress. There was a takeover of Grand Central Station of hundreds of Jews and partners and allies calling for immediate ceasefire. You may have seen the action at the Statue of Liberty. There's so many, too numerous to mention. But I can attest that this is coming from a very deep human and Jewish conscience. And when we talk about the role of religion in both war and peace, I think religion is used as a tool, basically. It can be used as a tool for war, and it can be used as a pretense to create peace as well, and that's the way it's always been. I think we are seeing, in the Jewish community, certainly, we are in the minority, but we are a rapidly growing minority, and I certainly think that we have time on our side because of the prevalence of young people, and I do believe we have history on our side, that we will see a new narrative be written. It will happen very painfully. The Jewish community, just like the world, will never quite look the same again, but I can speak from my own experience as just a humble American rabbi who's involved very, very actively in standing in solidarity with Palestinians as part of this movement, that this is very, very real. I'll just end with this. The night before I flew here on Friday night, my congregation was asked to lead a Shabbat service, a Sabbath service. The Jewish Shabbat begins on Friday evening. And in Chicago, where I live, there are members of Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago who are engaged in a hunger strike, almost a week now, in solidarity with the people of Palestine who are being starved by Israel as a weapon of war. And they're holding a series of public events throughout the city, and we were asked to lead a Shabbat service in Federal Plaza, which is in downtown Chicago. And this is what I did the night before I flew here, which is to lead a service. The hunger strikers were there, but also lots of their allies, members of the Jewish community, members of my congregation, also Palestinians were there to welcome the Shabbat together and to show our support and love for these people who are literally putting their bodies on the line out of religious, moral conviction of solidarity, because solidarity is not only a political, strategic tactic, it is also a sacred act. Fasting and hunger striking in many different religious traditions is a spiritual discipline. And it just occurred to me that we were asked to do this service, and of course I did it, and this has become a natural part of what I do now. And there is a growing community and growing consensus in the Jewish community, I can absolutely attest, and I'd be happy to entertain questions and thoughts later on, that there is something awakening in the Jewish community. We are in the minority, but we're a growing minority. We don't have the resources of the Jewish establishment, but I do believe that it is very, very real and very, very important and worthy of our attention. And I hope that our friends in Europe, where things I know are different, can understand that the model that is being experienced by the Jewish community in the United States is something that can be replicated, I do believe. That's why I'm so very happy to be here in Vienna to be able to share some of this with you. And with that, I'll end for now and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Brant. I think for many, this Jewish voice is seldom we've heard it today from so many people, also journalists in Europe. And I think sometimes almost I could feel that the breathing of some people stopped. But this is why exactly we need to hear these voices. I will come to you back. And just for you to know, we will start with a short input from each of the panelists, then we will have a discussion here, and then we'll open for discourse with you too. So let me welcome then Professor Mohammed Abu-Nimer. He's a peace building scholar and practitioner specializing in conflict resolutions and interfaith dialogue, professor at the School of International Service at the American University in Washington, D.C., and senior advisor at the Qaisi Dialogue Center, former senior advisor at the Qaisi Dialogue Center when it was in Vienna. He has led peace dialogue initiatives across the world, Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. And he descends actually from Maghar in Upper Galilee, where part of his family are still there. Welcome, Mohammed. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Viola, for the kind introduction, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the Kreisky platform. It's been a while since we're looking forward to share a platform with you as well. It's an honor to be hosted, as well as to share the platform, this one, with my both colleagues here. I am going to try, I'm a professor, so between two preachers, so I'm going to speak from the academic or scholar and peace building. I've been doing this work for over 40 years, since I was 19 years old. I don't know the long story how I got into this. But I ended up in this field. And in the past 2 years, so I teach peace and conflict resolution in graduate school at the American University, and we produce the young conflict resolution future scholars and practitioners. And I've done hundreds of those trainings around the world. It's been very hard the past 2 years to defend the core values and the core mission of my life, as well as of my profession as a scholar of peace, where we believe in 5 things we try to transmit. One is the belief, the principal belief in nonviolence, that people should be nonviolent in their interaction with each other. Second, that all people, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender, are equally human and have the same exact right to live and to benefit from whatever this earth can offer them or they can offer this earth. The third principle we deal with is that when you face a conflict, you have to try and solve it peacefully, of course, and we teach people problem-solving techniques. That's the mechanics part of it. And we do those 5 sets of skills across the board. What we've witnessed right now, including the bombing of Iran by Israel in the past this week, and in what happened in Gaza, the killing of and the genocide of over 70,000 people and over 100,000 injured, starvation, and just seeing people trying to block food trucks from going in. These are a human trying to prevent other human, children from getting, and women from getting food, the basic food, and saying this is legitimate. And seeing this, it's very difficult to walk in the class and give a lecture about peace. I just came from Israel, Palestine, and my family and people told me, please don't talk about peace. We don't want to hear about this now. This is not the right thing to speak of. Find different language. So this is on my personal, professional work. On a more meta level, this whole human failure of handling this conflict now came to a point where 5 international law and the human rights treaties and covenants that were created to protect us from this situation have been destroyed since the Second World War. We see them violated, broken every single day. So how could you walk in a room and say, room of Muslim, Palestinian, Arab, not religious, just religious and non-religious, and tell them you should believe in international law. You should believe in the principle of nonviolence. It's very difficult and challenging to push that discourse in. But we don't have any other option. You have to push that discourse in. But what we're facing is really a reality where in the next maybe 10, 15 years, it will take such an effort to restore some belief in humanity. And that's a very dangerous road or path that we, European, Middle Eastern, Muslim, Christian, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, are walking down. For those of us who don't realize this, and we think we are safe from it now because we are in Europe or in beautiful Vienna, you never know when this can get to you. So the main principle here is to act, is to take a stand. So in the prophetic voice of religious leader, this is the test. Usually the test for any peace builder is during war, not during peace. It's during war. What do you do? And unfortunately, I see that with the pain, many of the religious, multi-religious platforms have failed us so far. Failed us to act like Jewish voice for peace. The testimony you've heard from Rabbi Brant give an illustration what a prophetic voice during war can be, as opposed to complacency and silence or blunt justification, as I saw on the Facebook today, which moved me to write even a post, that we should rejoice the destruction that took place in Iran now. When a voice of this, and it's put by a peace builder, it makes you really wonder what type of peace paradigm are you going to support in this aspect. I just wanted to start with this larger threat that we all face, not only Gazan children, or Iranian children and women and innocent people there, and even people who are in the army, also in Israel itself, whether they're civilian or army, people in the army. Europe will face this, the US will face this, and if you just now heard that Iran bombed a base in Qatar. So if you don't see it, things are moving faster than we even can comprehend toward this obsession with the notion that military and war can solve conflict. And this is happening after 60 years of Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, all are products of intervention by foreign powers who try to liberate them or bring democracy to them and solve their problem. Just think about it, that in this very short history, I just counted 7 or 8 wars where we tried to use militarization, we tried to use more weapon. And now the lesson that I'm supposed to give to my children and my students, you need to find a bigger gun. So we all waited until the bigger gun, the B-2, came from other parts of the side of the world and used the largest bombing in Iran and put a condition, surrender or you'll get more of this. There is no other path being presented to the Lebanese, to the Palestinian, to the Syrian, or to any other community in that context. So you need to raise your children to believe in war and believe in more weapon, more money to the industrial complex of military and weaponization. That exactly the solution we've been faced with it, and that's really the dynamic we're dealing with. Religious community, religious leaders are supposed during this time to offer a alternative voice, alternative discourse, one that is being based on common humanity, based on equal rights for everyone, based on theology of liberation, to liberate the human from their earthly suffering. But to do this in a joint way, It's maybe, with all due respect to Rabbi Brant, with the JVP and many other solidarity groups, it's good to do this unilaterally, sort of uni-national or uni-religious. But our test in this field, in this area, is to work together in solidarity, is to find Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu on a platform that speaks against the genocide, that speaks against the apartheid. Not the opposite, to silence every one of us in academia, in diplomacy, in corporation, in schools. In schools, I have kids in Washington who came complaining our teacher will not allow us to use the word genocide or to speak about apartheid. And everyone by now know that the root causes of Israel-Palestine, it's not a matter of economy only. And it's not a matter of communication between Jews and Israeli Jews and Palestinian. It's a matter of ideology of supremacy, a national supremacy, and religious messianic supremacy that basically, finally, after 25 years in the making, got hold of a government. And they think this is truly historic, that this is their chance to settle the conflict. And we send our children to the battle so they can come back and settle the conflict and say, we finished this conflict. We know this conflict does not end with this type of mechanics, with this type of ideology, with militarization. We need to be offering that voice, prophetic voice, together in Muslim, Christian, and Jews on the basis of common humanity, and to stand together against any form of religious and national superiority ideology that has caught the imagination of people involved, politicians involved in this conflict. And that's what's missing right now from the answer to the is religion a tool for peace or a tool for war. Unfortunately, we've been seeing it mainly in its classic form used for justifying violence, justifying genocide.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think just on the last one, I have to react. I think we need to talk about religious establishment because the voices here are sounding something totally different, and they are not only individuals. There are many there. We are not hearing them, and this is why actually we wanted to do this panel. And they are not by choice not being heard. They are being excluded, silenced, sanctioned, and whatever. I had just to come into this, sorry. So last but not least, Mitri Raheb, a Palestinian Lutheran pastor, theologian, and one of the prominent Christian leaders in Palestine, advocating for contextual theology, for justice, peace, and humanity. For decades now. He's the founder and the president of Dar al-Karim University in Bethlehem, author of many books on the Middle East Christianity and Palestinian identity, and has actually much done in the context of cultural empowerment in Palestine, by establishing the first university for arts in Palestine, in Bethlehem, with a dependant in Gaza, which is unfortunately, meanwhile, totally bombed. Mitri, welcome to Vienna. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the Kreisky Forum, for the invitation. It's great to be here and to meet here so many friends. Actually, my sister, who happens to be Viola, threatened me before saying I have 5 minutes. And so I have 5 points to make in these 5 minutes, just quickly. The first point is that we are living in scary times. You know, all the development in the post-Second World War when tools were developed like human rights, international law, Geneva Convention, to make sure that things like the First World War and Second World War that destroyed Europe will not happen again, all of these development achievements actually are right now threatened with this populism that we see around us. And I know here in Austria, you know what I'm talking about. The question is, today, if you want to violate human rights and international law, how can you go off the hook by doing this? You can do that only if you refer to a power that is higher than international law and human rights, which is the divine rights. So when Russia wants to invade Ukraine, you will get the patriarch, the Russian Orthodox patriarch, and Putin kissing each other and giving the blessing for this war. This is above international law. Or ISIS in Islam. You know, you have sheikhs who sanction the killing of everyone else, even Muslim who think differently. Or you have somebody like Netanyahu who on October 27th, 2023, when he announced that the Israeli troops are entering Gaza, he quoted 1 Samuel 15:3, where God himself is sanctioning ethnic cleansing. In this verse, we read God saying, you go in and smash Amalek, kill young and old, women and men, child and suckling, ox and sheep, don't leave anything alive. And this is what Israel is doing, sanctioned by God himself. And I think this is a challenge that we have to face. And the question is it possible to violate human rights in the name of divine rights? That's a very important question. Now, the second point I would like to make is in all three scriptures, Jewish, Christians, and Muslims, actually you can find all different kinds of texts. So, if you would like to have a text that talks about genocide, you go to the book of Joshua. And by the way, Ben Gurion, Moshe Dayan, and Benjamin Netanyahu, in their writings, they saw themselves being Joshua, occupying the land, ethnic cleansing the indigenous people, and they do that in the name of God. So we have, now if you would like to find Jewish texts that talks about justice, that Rabbi Brant used, you go to the prophets, right? So both are there. Or if you go to the Quran, if you want texts that speak positively about the Christians, you go to the Meccan surahs. If you would like to have things that are critical of Christians, you go to the Medinan surahs. So what we find in these texts, both is there. What we find there says not so much about the texts, but about ourselves. And so for me, these scriptures are like a mirror. You find there what you are. So if you would like to have text of colonization, it is there. And if you would like to find text of liberation, it's there. It's up to us, human beings, to decide what we find. And this is our accountability in front of God that we should not easily disregard. The third point, for me, Gaza was the turning point, the same way like the Holocaust was the turning point for theology in Europe. You know, after the Holocaust, Christian theologians had to come together and say, maybe in our theology we have been demonizing Jews and we need to change that. And they started working on a theology after Holocaust. I think today we are in need of theology after Gaza, because we have been demonizing Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians, and we need to rethink this kind of theology. And it's not only, and this is important, it's not only the Christian theologians that has to do that. Now is the time for Jewish theologians to rethink the theology that they have been doing. You know, many rabbis, not Rabbi Brant, were all the time coming to us and telling us, your theology was so terrible, you have to repent. Now it's our time to tell the Jewish theologians that your theology right now is terrible, you have to repent. And so that is important. You know, when I think of our people in Gaza, they did not lose their faith in God. They lost their faith in humanity. And this is very dangerous. The third point I would like to make is the fourth, yeah, sorry. Good, I just wanted to make sure that my sister follow me. She's keeping score. Is alert, yeah. So the fourth point I would like to make is that often, especially in Europe, I see people demonizing religion. They always say, oh, you know, these crazy religious people are doing all of these wars. As if the secular people were able to make peace. Remember, in 1982, there was no Hezbollah. In 1988, there was no Hamas. And still, our occupation continued by the Labour Party, by the Israeli Labour Party, a secular party. There was not Likud yet until 1977. So it's easy, I think, to demonize religion as these crazy people. And I think these crazy people exist today because we failed in bringing peace to this world. And a very important thinker, contemporary thinker from the Cameroon in Africa, Achille Bambe, he wrote a book called Necropolitics. And what he writes in that book, actually, is that the so-called democratic countries today are creating what he called death worlds. Basically, creating wars everywhere and leaving people on the edge of dying, but they can survive on, you know, trying to get food like in Gaza. This is happening by democratic countries, by countries who are investing actually in military. And what we see in Gaza is that Israel is the only country that actually can test its weapons on real people and real time, just to, you know, to modernize all these military equipment. And the last point, quickly, is religion is part of the problem, but religion can be part of the solution. But religion needs always a political vision to support. We cannot, and this is, I think, history taught us there, we cannot expect the religious people to come up with a solution. But if politicians, the civil society, the religious people together can come up with a sustainable peace vision, then religious leaders actually can support this vision and make sure that this vision can be sustainable. So religious people will never replace political accountability, but they can support actually a sustainable political vision. These are my 5 points. I did it in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitri. I would like first maybe to have some discussion here before opening it to public. And I would like to come back to you Rabbi Brant, and maybe share with the audience. When I first thought about holding this panel, I had in mind a very good friend of actually the three of us. I'm not sure, Mohammed, but maybe Mark Ellis, a Jewish liberation theologian who wrote about prophetic Judaism in solidarity with Palestinians in the end of the 80s. But he had cancer at that time, and he said, I won't be able to come this time to Vienna, but I can only recommend to you to invite Rabbi Brant. And he sent me a picture also later to intensify my intention to invite you, with a picture with you in the religious Jewish clothing, cuffed next to his son Aaron by American police for protesting not in our name. And I say that because I think people do not realize the price people are paying for stepping out of silence or of complicity, to take a stand, not so much also by the outside, but also by the inner. Can you maybe share something with that with us?
Sure. Yes, you know, I first learned about the work of Mark Ellis, whose work I highly recommend. He was a very prolific writer. When I was in rabbinical school, he wrote his book, Toward a Theology of Jewish Liberation, in 1988, 87, 88. It underwent many revisions since then. And I read it, and I wasn't really able to fully heed its words at that time. And he was enormously, as Viola said, enormously prophetic. He talked about prophetic Judaism. He also talked about what he called the ecumenical deal, which was that following World War II in Jewish-Christian dialogue, there was a certain deal, which is that we can engage in interfaith conversation, but Israel is off the table. And, you know, I think that idea is enormously relevant in the current moment. He had so much else to say that was very, very prophetic in terms of prescient. You know, he paid, as Viola kind of insinuated, a very dear price for his ideas. He ended up not being able to find work. He was, his last academic appointment was at Baylor, and he was fired from Baylor and spent the last several years of his life pretty much in exile, but he never stopped writing. When I started to get into hot water in my previous congregation, I was in a congregation for 16 years, and as I started to awaken my own sense of Palestine solidarity and leaving behind the Zionism that I was raised with, it started to cause trouble in my congregation, and we tried to make it work, and I ended up having to leave under very trying circumstances. And I noticed that Mark Ellis, who I had never met, whose work I had read and who was a very deep inspiration to me, he wrote about it. And then he reached out to me, and he became a very dear friend. And because he knew what I was going through, because he had gone through it himself. And this is not to self-aggrandize ourselves. It's not a pleasant experience to be in exile. It's not a pleasant experience to make these kinds of sacrifices. But I think in the current moment, you know, each and every one of us needs to think about what are we willing to do to put ourselves on the line, you know, because we are in an unprecedented moment. And I think for all of Mark's writing, he died almost a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. His ideas are so very, very relevant with every passing day. I think even more than what he wrote, I think his witness and his personal example of someone who stood by these ideas, even though he knew it would bring him unwelcome attention. to put it mildly, I think is very, very important. And we can all think of examples of this in our own lives. And sacrifices don't have to mean going into exile. They can mean different things to different people. But I think in a moment of genocide, which is what we're living through right now, in a moment of increased militarization that is terrifying to behold, it is very easy to feel powerless. It's very easy to be cowed into silence or intimidated. But I think each of us has the ability to find the courage of our conviction in some way, and that will be different for different people. And I feel Mark's presence very keenly right now, and I know that he's on this panel with us in many ways.
Thank you, Brant. Mohammed, we've talked about the silence or the lack of speaking of the religious establishments and also the dialogue, the official dialogue lines in the US, but also in Europe. And I would like you maybe to shed some light on why you believe this is the case, what they are afraid of. And with saying this question to you, I would just like to make one note that this panel tonight is not an interreligious dialogue. None of us up here see it as an interreligious dialogue. I think this is a sign of interreligious solidarity in times of humanity falling apart. Just to make that point clear. So, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you, Viola, for the note and also for the question here. Yeah, I think in the middle of, I'm on many boards around this issue of multi-religious and interfaith, and I was waiting after we denounce October 7, by October 8, we denounce and we condemn, and then I was waiting for many of those religious multi-platforms and religious institutions to speak up against the bombardment of Gaza and the killing and all what was been doing in Gaza in the first month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 7 months. And the responses I get, even when I written, just sign a statement for ceasefire. And I was shocked that the platform I've worked with for over 6, 7 years on their board, Christian, Muslim, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, they refused. So I decided to do research. I'm an academician. I have to do research. So I went and I collected 178 statements by religious institutions in response to Gaza. And I told my PhD student who worked with me, let's do content analysis. What are they saying in their language? And let's separate those who are Jewish alone, Muslim alone, Christian alone, and then we will also look only at those who are jointly working together, a platform, like Religion for Peace in New York, or I don't want to name them here publicly, but there are about 8 or 9 mega transnational platforms. And I found out, and then we did some interviews, why you are not able to speak up, why not to take a stand on the ceasefire, why not to name the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the apartheid. And there were 4 or 5 reasons. The first reason was on the top, many of them say it bluntly, funding, money. Our donor will not necessarily like this terminology, and they will not necessarily continue funding us, which means many of the platforms are connected to donor, and the donor connected to government, so the government discourse and the donor are from the north, if you mostly north or the Gulf, and similar reaction in both of them on this case. Second reason was, I'm afraid of being called anti-Semitic, because any critique of Israel policy of apartheid is mixed with Zionism and mixed with anti-Semitism, and no one is going to touch this sacred taboo. No one, even government or non-government and religious authority, and even teachers and academicians and professors are all afraid of being punished and sanctioned if they are accused. In fact, this has been used as a big tool now of anti-Semitism. The British government just yesterday or today banned Palestine Action as a terrorist organization in the UK on the base of anti-Semitism as well. So anti-Semitism, the fear of it, is this success of linking any critique of Israel with anti-Semitism is a very important silencing tool for many of the religious groups. A fourth one, in fact, and I was surprised, is the notion of Islamophobia, is that you detect that actually many of the people who work in this field, like Mitri here mentioned, believe and they're affected by the notion of fear of Islam. Any form of Islam make them fearful. They have this phobia. And that, they said, no, maybe they're right. We're not attacking Palestinian. They want to kill Hamas. As if Hamas is, and the term was used, a weed. You are weeding out the Gaza from Hamas. So they had this Islamophobic sense, and also the dehumanization. Apparently, Palestinian life is less than Jewish Israeli life. And there is a price tag on it, and this is known. So it's okay to shed the entire light on the hostages and know the names, and for Biden to mention the 2.5 years old girl who was kidnapped, but ignore thousands of Palestinian children who were killed. So that discourse of racism and anti-Palestinian dehumanization of it is another reason why I found out they're not convinced. People I've worked with also, they're not necessarily convinced that all of us are equal. And the last one was this notion of exceptionalism. Oh, you know, I do work in dialogue, we are together, but I still think that my path to God is exceptional. My communication to God is the right way. And therefore, those who believe differently, if they're attacked, I don't need to take a stand. So this support of this discourse, those are 5 reasons we just working on publishing some of the outcomes from those 178 statements. But it's real. It's real because if you don't speak, then I don't trust you. I'm not worried. I'm not going to come to your dialogue. I'm not going to come to work with you. I'm not going to trust even your God. I'm not going to trust. So if I don't trust you, you don't have a credibility. And if I don't have any credibility as a religious leader or a joint platform, and I don't also believe in the government and Western government hypocrisy regarding the democracy and the human rights and all of that, as I mentioned earlier. So I need a different path. And we don't know what this next path is going to be. But it will be within 5 to 10 years, a new path. It will be more brutal, more destructive, will capture the imagination of people who have lost faith in humanity.
Thank you, Mohammed. I would like to take this to pose one question to you, Mitri. I mean, hearing Mohammed's summary now is very bleak. You almost get depressed more than you've been depressed.
The next question, ask me about hope. I'll give you some
yeah, and I'll hope I will come to it at the end. I'm keeping it until the last. But isn't this actually summary very much also connected to whom are we looking at as actors? Is it not a symptom in the North? I know that your work also in theology after Gaza had a totally different response, but it had brought somebody from the global South. Can you maybe share something of the solidarity movement encountering the weaponization of religion that is going on across the global South because they have gone through similar dehumanization processes and religion being weaponized by it?
Yeah. Actually, a Latin American bishop, Catholic bishop, once said, there are things that can be seen only through eyes that have cried. There are things that can be only seen through eyes that have cried. And if we look, for example, at Gaza and see who stood with Gaza and who stood against Gaza, guess what we find? All countries with a settler colonial history stood with Israel. All of them. And all countries who experienced and suffered under settler colonialism, they stood with Palestine. So, South Africa, Ireland, I mean, just as to think also of a country in the north, because they were colonized, and they understood exactly the suffering of the Palestinian people. And so I think this is the cross-solidarity we are talking about here. The African American, they immediately actually could understand our issue when they came to visit us. They said, you know, this is similar to what we went through when we had segregation here. The Native Americans or the indigenous populations everywhere, where their culture was destroyed and they were put into Bantustans or homelands or reservations, when they come to Bethlehem, they immediately recognized actually something that they are experiencing themselves. And this is why I think there is a north-south divide to some extent. And this is why I tell you, we did a conference last year on the topic of academia after Gaza. Academia after Gaza. And you know, I was trained in Germany. And when I studied there, you know, it was like this. Germans were developing theology, the real thing. But people in subtropical countries, like, you know, Latin America, they were developing liberation theology. It's not the real thing. You know, these poor people haven't yet reached the German level. But now, after Gaza, when I see how history is written in the North, I ask myself, why can't we trust this historiography anymore? So there is a big question mark. And I think it was not by chance that I quoted here Achille Pombe from Cameroon. I don't quote anymore theologians from the North. All my first 49 books, I was trying to quote people from the North. I don't anymore. It's enough. Now we have to give the voice to those people in the North because their eyes have been crying for so long and they can see things that others cannot see.
Thank you, Mitri. So you've been waiting for long, so I would like to open for questions.